garbage to just what's in that size container, would they qualify for a tax credit?
Sure.
Because if that's the case, it would seem that, I'm just going on based on my own experience. I mean, I have never exceeded more than my size garbage container. And I would say that that would be true of the vast majority of the residents if they have one of those big rollout things. And so you would be in effect giving a tax credit to quite a large percentage, which is what you want to do. So again,
Right.
the question is that, so if that's how you want to draft it up, that's how.
The idea is that we would give a tax credit to everybody who has to pay the fee for garbage collection. But we're also talking about establishing a minimum. Essentially what we've talked about doing in previous work sessions is the city providing for a base fee, preferably something, we'll have to see how this works out, but preferably something close to what folks are currently paying. That would be the ideal, but we'll have to see how those numbers actually play out. But for a base fee, the city provides one rollout container for garbage and one rollout container for recycling. So we're not talking about the big, we're not talking about the large containers they use out in the county. I mean, ideally we would go with the, because if you're talking about an incentive to reduce waste, then you want to start the base at the smallest option. So we're talking about probably 35-gallon trash cans for the base model. That's not going to work for everybody. Some folks are going to want the 55-gallon cans. Some folks are going to want multiple cans. Some folks are liable to want the 85-gallon cans or the 90-gallon cans, and that's that's their prerogative. Let's say the average household produces. We don't know this for a fact. This is some of the information we're still working on getting. We need to gather. Let's say the average household fills up one 55-gallon can a week. Let's say that's the average. What we're talking about is a tax credit that offsets the average fee per household. Let's pretend we're not charging a variable rate. Let's say we're charging a flat fee. This is just to simplify things. Let's say we're charging a flat fee without a variable rate. Everybody pays the exact same garbage fee, but it covers the cost of collection. Right now, the garbage fee covers 40% of the cost of collection. Let's say we charge a flat fee that brings in $1.6 million for the city. People's rates go up. Everybody's rates go up 60%. And then everybody would get a tax credit that would be exactly equivalent to that fee increase. Now, there's no sense in doing that, except that the only sense in doing that is that it would move the way we fund garbage collection from a hybrid, fee/tax system to a purely a fee system. And that's obviously not what we're talking about. We're talking about charging by volume. But you see what I'm saying? The average user, this will be just a pure wash, a total wash. Folks who are using more than average, their fee will go up a little bit more than their taxes will go down. And folks who are throwing away less trash than average, their fee will go up less than the sum of their tax credit. So anybody who's only setting out one 35-gallon can a week is actually immediately saving money under the system. The average garbage producer is seeing just a pure wash, and folks who are throwing out above average are paying more than they currently do. Is it the wisdom of the commission that a provision in the ordinance be included saying that that you can only put garbage in your own garbage container, so that residents can't share a garbage container and try and avoid and try and get a tax break or a tax credit where you have one or two that join together and just use one container so that they can get a tax credit. So do you want to
have the ordinance say that you can't share with your neighbor?
I actually don't have a problem with folks sharing with their neighbors. I mean, if the goal here is to get, I mean, we definitely need to make it illegal to put trash in somebody else's can without their knowledge or consent.
But if there's consent,
But if folks want to, I mean, if folks can reduce their waste enough to get by with one can between two households, that fits our purposes. I mean, we're trying to encourage folks to fill up less trash cans.
But if I could interject, one of the things that I would be weary of is if someone wants to share cans, and that's their prerogative. But in terms of giving multiple tax credits to that person for sharing that, I don't know that that's the direction that we're going to want to go down, because it would be very difficult to calculate our revenue stream by doing it that way. So I don't think that we'd want to give multiple tax credits to people, but if they wanted to share, then it certainly would be their prerogative, I think.
A question, what tax are we reducing?
Well, I think that's actually a question for, there's an extent to which that's a question for Rob and staff. If we're talking about a tax break, if we're talking about actually lowering a tax, then we do need to settle on a particular tax. If we're talking about issuing a tax credit,
Well, if
Does that need to be associated with a
taxes
specific-
go down, right? I mean, you get it. So I'm just curious, I mean, what, obviously, question, do you, all three of you, are you all in agreement with what the Commissioner Wilder is saying this time? Are you all in total agreement with what, in his directions to Rob?
Yeah, and well, let me just add real quick, Mayor, that I think that the wisdom of using a tax credit, case in point, in my mind, when I'm thinking of the tax that we could use or reduce would be the property tax. And why we're saying a credit is because you don't want to lower that overall tax rate. But we can give a credit which would not do that. And I think that the advantages of doing that is that, you know, if you were to say, okay, well, as a way to give back, to balance it out, we're going to lower the overall rate of property taxes, then that's also going to affect businesses that own property or any other entity that's not a resident that participates in the trash program. So what you're trying to do is to isolate the individuals who are involved in the residential trash collection system to offset any increased fee that they may get from moving it to a fee basis. Do you see what I'm saying?
Not really.
Okay.
But
if I could add one thing real quick.
I know the debate you're trying to make, I think I do. Now, if the three of you are in concurrence with this, obviously it's going to pass, whatever you say. Point out, this may not be the exact meeting to discuss all this, but when you, as you referred to, Commissioner, lower the property tax. Now, I think, in my gut level feeling, before we get to that point, there should be some real discussion about that. And
I guess that's my comment, Mayor, is that I don't expect there to be instant agreement on this, but there does need to be discussion of this, and I think that's what we're doing. I mean, this is part of that,
yes,
that discussion.
But in trying to give direction, I may be wrong. Rob, you may understand all, Mr. Moore, you may understand all this. But the wording of an ordinance, you know, just what I'm concerned about, the wording of the ordinance that you have here, you've got to be careful, I think, when you state that.
This doesn't affect the ordinance. This has nothing to do with the ordinance that
We're
Rob's
talking about
prepared
right
for us to vote on this. We've moved on to another piece of
that we're discussing, had to put in, he's concerned about the wording of the ordinance, correct?
I don't think so.
This, the wording, my understanding is that the commission is satisfied with the wording of the ordinance for the waiving of the garbage fee for the last 6-month time period. And now we moved on and we're discussing about the wording of an ordinance that would put in place the new garbage fee and the new garbage procedures, if you will. And so that's why I'm asking these questions,
Sure.
because it seems to me that sometimes it's harder to really ask the right questions and see how something's going to work until you have a target to shoot at. And once you have a target to shoot at, I can draft something fairly rough for the commission to look at and say, well, we really didn't intend it to go that way, or that raises a question. For example, if you give a tax credit on the property tax, how is that going to impact the renters, where the renter is the one that has to pay the property tax under the terms of his lease with his landlord, or her lease with her landlord, whichever the case may be. And then there's a tax credit. Who gets the tax credit? Does the landlord get it, or does the tenant get it? And of course, that could be covered by the agreement between the landlord and the tenant. And that's probably how it should be handled. But a lot of times, the tenant may be younger and less sophisticated than the landlord, and therefore not know to include that provision in the document. One other question, and this is really beyond the issue of the ordinance itself, but has the commission considered, instead of issuing tax credit or some type of reduction in tax, has the commission considered on an annual basis determining what the fee is based upon the cost of the program the year before, which may or may not go up and down because of the participation in the recycling and trash reduction? Because one way to do it where you're not having to issue individual tax credits is you say, okay,